Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to get into something I think is super cool. How our muscles actually move.
Yeah,
We'll be taking a close look at this physiology handout by Dr. Rasha Eldeeb.
sounds good.
Get ready, because this stuff is seriously fascinating.
I think a lot of people take movement for granted, but once you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's amazing.
Right. Like picking up a pen.
Uh-huh.
Seems simple,
Right.
but there's a whole chain of command going on under the surface.
Yeah, it starts all the way up in the brain,
Right?
sends signals down the spinal cord to groups of nerve cells that are like specialized control centers for different muscles.
It's like one for my bicep and one for my triceps.
Exactly. We call these motor neuron pools,
Motor neuron.
and they're
Yeah.
super organized,
Okay.
with the cells controlling a particular muscle, usually all clustered together in like one or two segments of the spinal cord.
Gotcha. So the signal gets to the motor neuron pool, then what?
That's where the motor units come in.
Okay.
Motor units are the real workhorses of muscle movement.
Hmm.
Each one is made up of a single nerve cell in the spinal cord, its axon, and all the muscle fibers that axon connects to.
So like one command center controlling a bunch of workers.
Perfect analogy.
Cool.
Now, get this. The number of muscle fibers per motor unit, that actually varies depending on what the muscle does.
Oh, interesting.
Like muscles for fine motor control, think fingers or eyes.
Right.
Those have smaller motor units, maybe controlling just a few muscle fibers. That's how we get those really precise movements.
Makes sense. Don't want your hand jerking around when you're trying to write.
Right. On the flip side, muscles that need a lot of power, like your legs or back,
Mm-hmm.
they have larger motor units, sometimes controlling hundreds of muscle fibers all at once.
So it's like the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Small motor units for precision, big ones for power.
And to add another layer of complexity,
Okay.
different motor units also have different thresholds for activation. Some need a stronger signal to fire than others. That's how we can gradually increase muscle force.
Right.
Like, think about pressing the gas pedal gently versus slamming it to the floor.
Right.
You're essentially activating more and more motor units to get more power.
Our bodies are amazing.
Right.
Okay, so we've got the signals coming from the brain, going down the spinal cord to the motor units.
Right.
How does the signal actually get from the nerve to the muscle fiber?
That happens at a place called the neuromuscular junction, or NMJ.
Okay, the NMJ. Let's zoom in there. What's going on?
So at the NMJ, the nerve fiber gets really, really close to the muscle fiber, but they don't actually touch.
Interesting.
There's a teeny tiny gap called the synaptic cleft.
So how does the signal cross that gap?
It needs a chemical messenger, a neurotransmitter.
Okay,
This one's called acetylcholine.
acetylcholine.
It's stored in tiny sacs called vesicles within the nerve ending.
Hmm.
When the nerve impulse arrives, it triggers the release of acetylcholine into that synaptic cleft.
So it's like the message is on its way. What happens when it gets to the muscle fiber?
It has a very specific target, receptors on the muscle fiber's membrane.
Okay.
These receptors are kind of like locks, and acetylcholine is the key.
Gotcha. So what happens when the key unlocks the lock?
When the acetylcholine binds to its receptor, it opens channels that let sodium ions flood into the muscle fiber.
Okay.
And that sudden influx of sodium ions, that's what triggers the electrical signal that travels along the muscle fiber and eventually leads to contraction.
It's amazing how one tiny molecule can set off such a big chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But if the acetylcholine keeps signaling, wouldn't muscle just stay contracted? How does it relax?
You're right. That's where another key player comes in, an enzyme called cholinesterase.
Cholinesterase.
It basically acts like a cleanup crew, breaking down acetylcholine in that synaptic cleft really quickly.
Oh, okay.
That ensures that the muscle can relax after each contraction.
So it's like a carefully timed on-off switch.
Precisely.
Wow. Without it, our muscles would just be stuck in the on position.
You got it.
That's a little scary to think about. It really shows how important that balance is.
Yeah. This whole intricate dance of signals and chemicals and muscle contractions is happening all the time throughout our bodies. It's what allows us to move freely. And that's just the beginning.
Mind-blowing. Now that we've got a handle on how a muscle contracts and relaxes, let's talk about some of the other cool features of this communication process.
There's a lot more to uncover.
All right. You ready to go deeper?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so deeper we go. What are some of these cool features?
Well, for starters, this whole transmission process is a one-way street. The signal goes from the nerve to the muscle, but not the other way around.
Right, so our muscles aren't sending confusing signals back to the brain.
Exactly. Imagine if they were, telling the brain to move in random directions. Talk about a mess.
Yeah, no thanks. Wouldn't be very coordinated. Anything else?
Yeah, there's also a tiny delay between when the nerve impulse arrives and when the muscle actually contracts.
Like a lag?
Yeah, but super small, we're talking half a millisecond.
Wow, that's fast.
Oh, yeah, but it's super important for coordination. All those complex movements we do, they rely on that precise timing.
So it's like a perfectly timed relay race.
Exactly. Now, here's another interesting thing. If the NMJ is stimulated over and over, it can actually get fatigued.
Oh, so that's why our muscles get tired after exercise.
That's a big part of it. With all that repeated use, the acetylcholine can get depleted, so the nerve has a harder time signaling the muscle.
Like running out of fuel for the signal. Makes sense why rest is important.
Absolutely. And one more thing I'll mention, the concentration of certain ions, like calcium and magnesium, in the fluid around the cells can also affect how much acetylcholine gets released.
Like having a volume knob for the signal.
Exactly. Higher calcium levels can boost the signal, while higher magnesium levels can dampen it. Pretty cool, huh?
That's wild. So many factors can influence this whole process. It makes me think, what about stuff we encounter in our everyday lives? Could those things affect neuromuscular transmission too? Like medications?
You bet. Actually, we've already talked about one example, the medications for myasthenia gravis.
Right, the ones that help by boosting that acetylcholine signal.
Exactly. But there are other substances that can actually disrupt transmission and cause serious problems.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Well, certain types of pesticides, for example.
Pesticides.
Yeah, the ones that target insect nervous systems. They often do this by blocking the breakdown of acetylcholine.
So like the myasthenia gravis meds, but the opposite effect.
Kind of. It sounds counterintuitive, but for insects, blocking the breakdown of acetylcholine overstimulates their muscles, leading to paralysis and ultimately death.
Wow, that's pretty intense. But what about humans? We're exposed to pesticides too.
That's the concern. Of course, pesticides are designed to be more toxic to insects, but there's still a risk, especially for people who work with them a lot, like farmers.
So for them, overexposure could mean their muscles are constantly being stimulated, leading to all sorts of issues.
Exactly. Fatigue, weakness, cramps, even difficulty breathing, or paralysis in severe cases. It really underscores the importance of safety precautions and protective gear when working with these chemicals.
Right. And I imagine it makes you wonder about the long-term effects of being exposed to pesticides and other chemicals that could mess with our nervous systems.
Absolutely. There's still a lot we don't know about the long-term consequences, but it's a growing area of research.
Definitely a reminder that there's still so much to learn. Well, this deep dive has been eye-opening. We've covered so much from the microscopic level of those motor units and the NMJ all the way to the real-world implications of medications and pesticides. Anything else we should touch on before wrapping up?
I think it's worth pausing to appreciate just how amazing it is that all these processes are happening inside us all the time without us even thinking about it. Every breath, every step, every word we speak, it's all orchestrated by this incredible system.
It's mind-blowing, right? A whole hidden world of complexity that we just take for granted.
Exactly. And I think taking a peek into that world, even just for a little while, helps us appreciate the wonders of our own bodies.
I totally agree. It's been a fascinating journey into the world of muscle movement. Now, before we say goodbye, any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to leave them pondering.
Well, knowing how sensitive the neuromuscular junction is, I'd say it's worth thinking about the bigger implications of that. What does it mean for how we live our lives, the environments we're exposed to, even the foods we eat? It's a lot to consider, but becoming more aware of these connections can help us make choices that support our health and well-being.
That's a great point. We've been focusing on the microscopic level,
Hmm.
but the implications are much broader.
Absolutely. That's what makes this kind of deep dive so valuable. It's not just about learning facts, it's about sparking curiosity and encouraging people to see the bigger picture.
Well said. I know I've learned a ton today.
Me too. Always a pleasure to share my passion for this stuff with a curious audience.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into muscle movement, everyone. We hope you've gained a new appreciation for your own incredible body.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those muscles moving.
See you on our next deep dive.
Yeah, it really is amazing, isn't it? Makes you realize we're a lot more than just skin and bones.
Absolutely, like a whole network of interconnected systems all working together.
Speaking of interconnectedness, we touched on how pesticides can disrupt things at the neuromuscular junction.
Right.
And it made me wonder, are there other everyday things, maybe even some that seem harmless, that could impact this system too?
That's a great question. And Honestly, it's something scientists are still trying to figure out,
Hmm.
but there are a few things that have come up that I think are worth talking about.
Okay, like what?
Well, some studies have shown that chronic stress might actually mess with how well our muscles work.
Oh, wow. I know stress is bad for you, but I never thought about it affecting our muscles like that. Yeah, it is kind of surprising, but think about it. When we're stressed out, our bodies pump out all these hormones like cortisol.
Right.
And those hormones, they can interfere with the balance of neurotransmitters and receptors at the NMJ.
So basically, stress is throwing a wrench in the whole system.
Exactly. And over time, that can lead to muscle weakness, fatigue, even pain.
Wow. Okay, so another reason to manage our stress.
Yeah.
Exercise, meditation, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Taking care of our mental and emotional health is just as important for our muscles as it is for everything else.
This whole deep dive has honestly changed how I think about my body.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing how much is going on under the surface, even for something as simple as picking up a coffee cup.
It really is a testament to how incredible the human body is, so complex, yet so adaptable.
Well said. All right, so for everyone listening out there, the next time you move, take a second to think about all the amazing stuff happening inside your muscles.
It's a good reminder that we're more than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder to take care of ourselves, both physically and mentally, to keep this amazing system working. Well, that's about it for our deep dive into the intricacies of muscle movement.
It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy getting to talk about this stuff.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you learned something new today.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep moving.
See you on our next deep dive.